Welcome to the show. My name is Reed Huberman. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. This show is dedicated to trying to help you apply Christian principles to all aspects of life so that we can engage the culture with a Christian worldview. Now, we're going to do that first through a story that went viral on X about a church that went woke. And of course, it could be like one of three places, either Protestia, woke preacher clips, or of course Megan Basham. And of course Megan Basham retweeted this church that was holding a segregated dinner for black people in honor of Black History Month. So here's what the post said. Res Oak Black Fellowship Dinner, Friday, February 21st, 2025 from 6:30 to 8:30. This dinner with our special guest, Reverend Dr. Erwin Ince, for black worshipers at Res Oak and their families. Come connect with and encourage one another as we cap off our month-long celebration of Black History Month with rich fellowship. RSVP here. Now, after reading that, I think we all know what this is. Of course, there are endless justifications for this kind of thing online, but we all know what we just read, unless you don't want to believe your lying eyes. And of course, we just read that this is a dinner just for black people. Now, of course, they probably wouldn't kick white people out if they decided to show up, and I don't understand why anybody wouldn't just identify as black in order to enjoy this rich fellowship, because I guess we could do that nowadays. But I think we all know what we just read. We read that this is a segregated dinner being held at a church of all places. Now, to double down on the foolishness of an event like this, Anthony Bradley, who is supposedly a theologian, is a research fellow at the Acton Institute, which is a Christian think tank that tries to envision what a virtuous society would look like from a biblical perspective. And he is a theological studies professor at Kuyper College, showing that these woke institutions no longer care about the namesake of their schools because Abraham Kuyper would be rolling in his grave thinking about justifying a blacks-only dinner in honor to celebrate Black History Month. So this professor made sure to defend this online and to attack Megan Basham for having the audacity to expose this racial grift taking place in churches. So this is what he had to say to Megan Basham. Megan Basham is the personification of low IQ. This is so dumb. This is the same ignorance that asks, why is there a black church? Research shows that content like hers is sure sign. Research shows that content like hers is a sure sign of significant father issues. There you go. If you disagree with me, it's because you got daddy issues and you're obviously not very intelligent. Now, I would love to see the research that shows us that daddy issues is the reason that Megan Basham exists. But it didn't stop there, because he went on further to suggest that this is my impression of Megan Basham at Megan Basham screaming about a group of black families at church having a dinner together during Black History Month, dividing up events by, quote, skin color, as she says. How dare black people get some time together as minorities in America? And of course, he made sure to connect this post with a picture of Ruby Bridges and white people shouting at this black girl who was going in to a previously segregated school. Now, I did notice something, and that is that Ruby Bridges was going into a white school, so she was desegregating that school, whereas this post in this church is trying to segregate people on the basis of race. How the vicious cycle of DEI and race grifting always comes back to be racist. So what I might mention to you about all of this is that there's a similar energy going on here whenever we see the DEI race hustlers out there and they post this kind of stuff. They sound very similar to somebody that I've heard before.
You might as well attempt to reject our white skin. I mean, this is who we are. We made Christianity. As much as Christianity made us, we made Christianity.
For those of you who don't know, that was Richard Spencer, the well-known racist and white nationalist, speaking to Nick Fuentes. It shows you that there's a similarity between these two people and the racially essentialistic arguments that they make, because they indeed both are racists. There's two kinds of segregation: de facto segregation and de jure segregation. Now, de jure segregation, as you might imagine, is segregation based upon law. So think about segregation in the past, where there were laws that said white people and black people must be segregated in schools and restaurants and all that kind of thing before the Civil Rights Act of 1964. So those would be segregation policies in America by law, whereas de facto segregation is volitional segregation or segregation based upon your own choosing. Now, this happens all the time. We see that like attracts like very often, that very often black people choose to associate with and live around black people, and the same with whites. But so these are not necessarily laws. These are volitional choices that are being made either by happenstance or circumstance or whatever the case may be. But this is because people are choosing this kind of segregation. Segregation, if it exists in the present, isn't because of systemic racism. It isn't because of white privilege. It is because the intersectionalists want to try to perpetuate it, either because they can get a lot of money from a bunch of people who do not think for themselves, or because they themselves are deeply ignorant. Now, to put this on full display, I want to show you megachurch pastor Jamal Bryant and what he had to say about Donald Trump inviting a whole host of black influencers and black leaders into the White House to celebrate Black History Month. So here's what Jamal Bryant had to say.
Y'all been praying for me all week. You've been nervous all week, but I ain't afraid of the spooks that sat at the door.
Now, let me just mention to you, when he talks about the spooks at the door, and that's the word door, by the way, he is not talking about people who rely upon fear and fear-mongerers. He's using a racial slur there. The word spook is a racial slur intended to try to illustrate for you what may be another racial slur, Uncle Tom, let's say. So he's using a divisive and degrading term for other black people because he's so interested in equality.
These runaway slaves.
And there again, he called black people who went to celebrate Black History Month at the White House runaway slaves.
Hiding in the White House, gonna throw my picture up thinking that I'm gonna be afraid. If you got real courage, don't show my picture. Show the picture of the one that fired the black Joint Chief of Staff from the military. If you gonna show a picture of the CEO of Target, Walmart, McDonald's, and Amazon that does not recognize black dollars or black business. If you gonna put up a picture of the state legislators in Florida that are banning black books. If you gonna put up the picture of the one who is stealing classified information from the IRS and Social Security.
Now, make no mistake, Jamal Bryant, who is a megachurch pastor in Atlanta, is being 100% racist. But he is also lying in order to be racist to his congregation, who is very excited about these racist lies. Now, this could be because he listens to the mainstream media, and there are people out there, specifically in the Democratic Party, who haven't learned yet that these people lie constantly, just like we'll see Jen Psaki do here.
As I mentioned at the top of the show, we're following some breaking news this hour. Donald Trump has just fired General Charles Q. Brown, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the country's senior most military official. That job is essentially the president's top military advisor, and it usually holds over as administrations change. That's typically what happened. I mean, Joe Biden kept Trump's Joint Chiefs chairman, Mark Milley, until he stepped down at the end of 2023.
Okay, so there we have the norms. By the way, you should know that the reason General Brown was even in a position to be the Joint Chief of Staff is because Donald Trump nominated him to be the Chief of Staff of the Air Force back in 2020, I believe.
Donald Trump decided to buck with that tradition, and I have to say the optics here don't look great.
Now, what optics is she talking about here? I wonder.
CQ Brown was only the second black man to ever hold that position, and he just got fired amid Trump's push to end programs promoting equality in the federal government. He will be replaced by retired three-star Air Force Lieutenant General Dan Kane.
Ah, I see. So he fired a black man, and in his place, he put a white man? This cannot be. Now, why would Donald Trump do something like this? Is it because Donald Trump is what the media says he is, or might it be that General Charles Brown did this?
Please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, General. General, do we have too many white officers in the Air Force?
Senator, what I really look at is the quality of all the officers that we have, and we look at the aspect of everyone who's qualified. meets the qualifications, is promoted. And what
Well, I would agree with you, but that answer is not consistent with your August 9th memo. In your August 9th memo, you said that you signed on to that there should be a reduction essentially of about 9% of the white officers. That's 5,400. We have 5,400, too many white officers. And this is the real impact, I think, of this desire of the administration. I'm saddened to see this in this memo, of this obsession with sort of race-based politics being interjected into our military. How did you come up with the percentage of 67.5% of the officers should be white? And how did you come up with 13% should be black? And how did you come up with 10% should be Asian? And how did you come up with 1.5% should be American Indian and Native Alaskan? How did you come up with 1% being Native Hawaiian or other Pacific Islander? And how did you come up with 15% of our officers should be Hispanic or Latino?
Senator, that is based on that memo is on application goals, not the actual makeup of the force. And those numbers are based on the demographics of the nation.
Oh, so he was fired just because he hired people on the basis of their race?
That's racist.
Oh, wait a minute. All he's saying is that he wants less white people in the military.
That's racist.
Okay, so I get it. Let's just be honest. General Brown was fired because he was violating the Civil Rights Act. He was trying to hire people on the basis of their race, which is an insanely ridiculous idea, and it violates the Constitution. So here's the point as far as Anthony Bradley and pastors like Jamal Bryant are concerned. If you have to lie in order to push your racial narrative, then you don't have one. This yet again shows us that the demand for racism in America far outstrips the supply. If racism is happening in America, it is because of people like Bradley and Bryant. It is because they consistently want to try to drum up controversy, to create segregation where it didn't exist. Systemic racism and all of the other lies that we hear from the DEI race grifters out there is all an attempt to try to fleece you. So make no mistake about it. Systemic racism doesn't exist. It has to be created and it has to be lied about in order to drum up. And reparations are not necessary to give to a group of people who never experienced slavery from a group of people who never enslaved anybody. But also make no mistake about this. It is deeply, deeply unchristian, and it has no place in the church. And the fact that it is in the church shows that wokeism doesn't remain just in our secular institutions, but it is fully in the church. And I'm not just talking about black churches, I'm talking about white churches too. You don't get Matt Chandler talking about race-based hiring if DEI hasn't flooded the church.
If we find an Anglo 8 and an African American 7, which one do you want? I said, I want the African American 7.
So there's a simple cure here. Don't let your biblical illiteracy be the pathway for these kind of people to come into the back door of the church. Thank you for taking the time to watch that segment of the Indie Thinker podcast. If you enjoyed that, you'll love the full show, and you can find a link for that full show down in the description of this podcast. You can also click somewhere on the screen to access more Indie Thinker content, and you can become a member of Indie Thinker over at indiethinker.org/support, where you can gain exclusive access to ebooks, audiobooks, and movies that will help take your Christian worldview to the next level. But most importantly, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and go with God.